It was early November 2011, the kind of Pennsylvania afternoon when the air smells like wet leaves and the daylight fades before you're ready for it. I'd been driving since morning, chasing late-season colors for a freelance photo assignment. Old barns, forgotten crossings, anything that still whispered of autumn before winter turned the world gray. My map showed an abandoned rail spur cutting through a valley near Porter's Mill. From the highway, it looked unremarkable, a line of rusted track half buried in weeds. But something about the geometry, the way it curved into the trees, pulled me in. I turned down a gravel service road and parked beside a no trespassing sign so old the paint had bled away. The forest was quiet except for crows. Bare branches clacked overhead as I hiked along the tracks, camera swinging from my neck. I remember the smell of creosote and damp iron, the distant echo of running water. Then I saw it, a small cabin tucked among sycamores maybe 30 yards off the line. Roof sagging, porch half collapsed, chimney leaning like a drunk. Places like that are catnip to photographers. I snapped a few shots from the embankment. Wide framing, golden light slanting through fog. Beautiful, eerie, exactly what the magazine wanted. But when I zoomed in on the digital preview, I noticed something odd. Footprints in the mud leading to the porch. Fresh. That gave me pause. It was Sunday evening. No cars on the road, no smoke from the chimney. Still, curiosity always outweighs common sense when you do what I do. I climbed down, crossed the ditch, and stepped onto the creaking boards. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a groan that seemed too loud for the stillness around me. Inside smelled of mildew and old wood stove ash. Dust motes hung like snowflakes in the dim light filtering through the shutters. But there was warmth, faint, impossible warmth, coming from a stone hearth where a few embers still glowed under gray ash. Someone had been here recently. Then I saw the photographs. They covered an entire wall from floor to ceiling, hundreds of Polaroids pinned in neat, overlapping rows. Every image showed the same subject, the railway outside. Same stretch of track, same perspective, but taken on different days, different weather. Snow, rain, fog, summer sunlight. Each photo was labeled at the bottom in a tidy hand. Nov 1, Nov 2, Nov 3. At first I thought it was an art project, some obsessive documentation of time passing. Then my stomach tightened. In the last row of photos, a figure had begun to appear. A man standing on the tracks. First distant, then closer in each successive frame, until by the final photo he filled it completely, staring straight into the lens. I turned around slowly toward the window, the one facing the tracks. From where I stood, I could see the very same curve, the same perspective as the photos. My pulse was drumming in my ears. Click, the sound was so soft I almost missed it. Click, camera shutter. Outside. I killed my flashlight and pressed against the wall, heart hammering. Through a crack in the shutter, I could see the trees shifting in the wind, but no one. Still, the feeling of being watched was suffocating. I decided to leave. Quietly as I could, I slipped out the door and started back toward my car. The forest felt heavier, the air thicker. Halfway up the embankment, I heard a low whistle, a single note rising and falling like an old train signal. It came from somewhere down the track. I told myself it was the wind and kept moving. When I reached the road, twilight had turned the sky bruised purple. My car sat where I'd left it, but the driver's door was open. That stopped me cold. I distinctly remembered locking it. Inside, the passenger seat was covered with Polaroids, new ones still damp from development. Each showed me standing inside the cabin. The last one caught me mid-turn, looking straight at the camera through the window. That's when I ran. I drove until the GPS signal came back, pulled into the first gas station with lights, and stayed there until dawn. The clerk must have thought I was crazy, sitting in the corner clutching my camera bag and nursing burnt coffee until sunrise. When I told a county deputy what happened, he looked half amused, half concerned. That place burned down in the 90s, he said. Old surveyors stayed out there taking pictures of the line, disappeared after a freight derailment. You sure you're talking about the same cabin? I offered to show him. We drove back out that afternoon. The road was there, the rails still rusting through the weeds, but the cabin? Only a rectangle of scorched earth and cinders, long cold. No footprints, no Polaroids, nothing. The deputy shrugged. Kids, maybe. You photographers like to scare yourselves. I wanted to believe him. But when I dumped the files from my digital camera that night, among the shots of trees and sky was one I hadn't taken. Same framing as the wall of Polaroids, same tracks. But now there was a figure standing dead center of the rails, facing the lens. The timestamp said 5:17 p.m. That was the exact minute I'd been inside the cabin, alone. I stopped photographing abandoned places after that, switched to weddings, corporate events, safe, well-lit things. Yet every November when the fog drapes the valleys and the trains blow their horns miles away, I still hear that faint click, click, click in the back of my head, and I keep the camera that took that last picture locked in a box. Because sometimes when I check it, there's a new photo on the memory card, always the same view of those tracks, but taken from a few steps closer than before. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, one of those places where every house has a porch swing and every rumor lasts longer than the snow. When you live somewhere that quiet, you start to think you understand it. The roads, the people, the rhythm of the seasons. But sometimes the world you think you know slips sideways, and for a few terrifying seconds you see what's really hiding underneath. That happened to me when I was 16. It was the week before Thanksgiving 2005, the tail end of autumn. The maples had already shed their color, leaving only the dark bones of branches rattling in the wind. The sun set early, and by the time I finished my shift at Miller's Diner each evening, the world outside looked drained of life. Gray sky, gray roads, fog rising off the marshes. The diner sat near the highway, but my house was 2 miles down a side road that cut through a patch of woods everyone called Stony Hollow. It wasn't a long walk, but in November darkness it felt endless. The air smelled of iron and dead leaves. Every crunch of gravel sounded like footsteps behind me. That Monday, the fog came early. By the time I clocked out, it was already thick enough to hide the streetlights. My boss offered me a ride, but I said no. I needed the walk to clear my head before exams. I still remember the way the fog swallowed the road. It muffled the world until all I could hear was my own breathing. And that's when I saw her. A figure standing where the pavement dipped toward the trees, tall, thin, wearing a bright yellow raincoat. She wasn't moving, just watching the road. At first, I thought she was waiting for someone, maybe her car broke down. But as I got closer, I noticed her feet, bare, white against the blacktop, toenails blue from cold. "Ma'am, you okay?" I called, no answer. She turned her head slightly, and the motion stopped me dead. There was something wrong with her face. Not the features themselves, they were ordinary, but the emptiness in her eyes. She wasn't seeing me. She was staring past me like there was something standing over my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing but fog and trees. When I turned back, she was gone. No footsteps, no rustle of leaves, just empty road. I sprinted the rest of the way home, heart pounding like I'd been chased. My mom laughed it off when I told her. "Probably a reflection in the mist," she said. "You've been watching too many late-night shows." I wanted to believe her. 2 days later, Wednesday evening, I was bussing tables at the diner when I caught a flash of yellow through the front window. There, across Main Street, standing under the burned-out street lamp, was the same woman, same raincoat, same stillness. She faced the diner this time, unmoving amid the swirl of traffic. I dropped a tray of silverware. By the time my manager came over, she was gone again. He teased me, said maybe it was some secret admirer. I laughed along, but inside I felt sick. That night, I dreamt of her. She was standing at the foot of my bed, dripping water onto the floor, whispering words I couldn't understand. When I woke, the bedroom window was open and the hardwood was wet where rain shouldn't have reached. Thanksgiving Day came cold and bright. The whole town gathered at the community hall for the turkey drive. I tried to push the dreams out of my head, joking with friends, sneaking bites of pie. Around 3 p.m., the volunteer fire siren went off. Everyone went still. "Car accident," someone murmured. By evening, word spread a sedan had gone off the road in Stony Hollow, the same stretch I walked every night. The driver was a woman in her 30s, dead on impact. They said she must have skidded on black ice and rolled down the embankment. When they showed her photo on the local news, the world seemed to tilt. Same long hair, same narrow face, same yellow coat. I barely slept for a week. A few days later, I couldn't stand it anymore. I borrowed my friend Mark's bike and rode out to the crash site. The guardrail was twisted and yellow police tape flapped in the wind. Down the slope, the sedan sat half submerged in a drainage ditch, windshield cracked, hood folded like paper. Something yellow caught my eye in the reeds. I climbed down and found the raincoat tangled in branches, stiff with frost. Beneath it, the ground was dark with old water and mud. I turned to leave and froze. Footprints, bare footprints leading away from the wreck and up toward the road. They ended where the asphalt began, as if whoever made them had stepped off into thin air. I ran all the way home. Winter came early that year. Snow covered the guardrail, the ditch, the evidence, but every so often I'd hear someone mention seeing a woman in yellow by the side of the road on foggy nights. Sometimes near the diner, sometimes along the marsh, always standing perfectly still. I tried not to listen. Years passed. I went to college downstate, found a job in Syracuse, but every November around Thanksgiving I'd get that restless itch to drive home. The first year I resisted, the second I gave in. It was late when I reached the outskirts of town, cold rain turning to sleet. As I came around the bend near Stony Hollow, my headlights swept across something on the shoulder. A figure, yellow coat. She turned her head slowly as I passed, face pale and wet, eyes blank as frost. I hit the brakes, skidding to a stop. My breath fogged the windshield. The road behind me was empty. I told myself I imagined it. I had to, but when I got home, there was a wet footprint on the porch, bare, small, feminine, melting slowly into the wood grain. 10 years later, when I visit my parents, I still take the highway instead of the back road. The diner's gone now, replaced by a gas station. The old rail crossing at Stony Hollow has been repaved. Yet every fall when fog settles over the valley, people still whisper about the woman who walks the road in her yellow coat, waiting for a ride she never got. Some say she appears to anyone who ignores a warning sign. Others think she's just a story. But if you ever find yourself driving alone on a November night and you see a flash of yellow in the mist ahead, don't stop. Because sometimes the dead aren't lost. They're just waiting for someone else to take their place. I bought my first house in the fall of 2017, a one-story ranch at the edge of a quiet Vermont town, surrounded by birch trees and fog that rolled in from the lake like breath. It wasn't much, but it was mine. After years of apartments and neighbors stomping overhead, the silence felt like freedom. The realtor told me the place next door was empty. Belonged to an older man named Corbett, she said, flipping through her folder. He passed away last winter. The bank hasn't sold it yet. The house sat about 50 yards away through the trees, same 1950s design as mine, but with a sagging roof and a porch that leaned like it wanted to lie down. No curtains, no car, just a mailbox half buried in leaves. The first few weeks were uneventful. I worked remotely, unpacked, learned the rhythm of the woods. At night, I'd sit on my back porch with a beer, listening to owls and watching mist gather over the yard. Then the light started. It was the first Friday in November, cold enough for breath to fog the air, the moon barely a sliver. I was washing dishes when I saw a glow flicker through the trees. The Corbett house. I stepped closer to the window. A light was on inside, faint, yellowish like a bare bulb in a basement. Then it went out. I figured maybe the bank had sent someone to check the property. But the next night it happened again, same time, same window. A pulse of light, 3 quick flashes, pause, then one long. It looked deliberate. Like a signal, curiosity got the better of me. Around 10, I pulled on my jacket and walked down the path between our yards. The ground was soft with fallen leaves, every step whispering underfoot. The Corbett house loomed ahead, windows dark, door shut, roof glittering with frost. I circled around to the back. The air smelled of damp wood and something faintly metallic. Through the kitchen window, I saw the same bulb hanging from a frayed cord, swaying slightly as if someone had just brushed past it. I knocked once, then twice. No answer. The knob turned easily. Inside was cold as a root cellar. Wallpaper peeling, furniture draped in sheets. My flashlight beam caught a line of muddy footprints, leading from the back door toward the hallway. They stopped in front of a door under the stairs, one of those old narrow ones with a keyhole. The size of a dime. From behind it came a sound. A soft tap, tap, tap. I don't know what possessed me, but I crouched and peered through the keyhole. At first I saw only darkness. Then slowly something pale moved on the other side, a sliver of skin, maybe a hand, tracing circles on the wall. I stumbled back, heart racing, and bolted out of the house. When I looked over my shoulder from the tree line, the light in the window blinked again. 3 short, 1 long. The next morning I called the sheriff's office. They sent a deputy, a tired man named Weaver who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Probably squatters, he said after a quick look around. Kids from the high school. Happens every fall. He promised to padlock the door and left. That night I slept with every light on, but at 12:47 a.m. the glow returned, this time from upstairs, flickering steadily behind the second-story curtain like someone walking back and forth. I watched until it went dark, then forced myself to lie still, telling myself if I ignored it, it would stop. 2 days later, I came home from grocery shopping to find muddy footprints on my back deck. Bare footprints, heel to toe, leading to my sliding glass door. No sign of forced entry. Nothing missing. The next evening, just before dusk, I saw a shape move through the Corbett yard. Tall, thin, carrying something metallic. A shovel. The figure walked to the base of a birch tree, knelt, and began to dig. I grabbed my phone and zoomed the camera. The resolution was terrible in the fog, but I caught one clear detail before the figure stopped and looked up, directly at me. The face was featureless in the distance, but the eyes reflected light like an animal's. I ducked behind the curtains. When I looked again, the yard was empty. By mid-November, I was sleeping in snatches, jolting awake at every creak. I stopped walking the property, stopped answering the phone. My coworkers said I sounded distracted. I lied and said I was just tired. Then came the storm. It was a Sunday night, wind shrieking through the eaves, power lines humming. Around 9 p.m., the lights went out across the valley. I lit a candle and tried to read, but the noise from next door kept pulling my attention. Banging, scraping, the groan of wood under weight. I told myself it was the wind. Then someone knocked on my door. 3 short raps, then one long exactly like the light signal. I didn't move. After a minute, the knocking stopped. I crept to the peephole. Nothing, just rain. But when lightning flashed, I saw footprints on the porch, bare, muddy, the same as before. And beyond them, across the yard, the Corbett house stood with every window blazing. When morning came, the storm had passed. Power was back. The neighbors' lights were off again, house still as stone. I decided I was done. Packed a bag, called a motel in Burlington, and told my boss I'd work remotely for the week. But before leaving, I wanted proof. I set up a motion-activated trail cam aimed at the Corbett place right through the trees. When I got back 4 days later, the camera battery was dead. I loaded the SD card onto my laptop. The first few clips were normal. Squirrels, wind-blown branches, nothing special. Then came a video time-stamped Tuesday, 1:14 a.m. It showed the Corbett house dark for a few seconds. Then suddenly a light flared in the upstairs window. A figure appeared. It was me. Same jacket, same posture, standing at the glass and staring out toward my own house. Then, after 20 seconds, the light went out. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the exposure, maybe someone else who looked like me. But the next clip erased that hope entirely. Timestamp: Wednesday, 12:47 a.m. The camera faced my yard this time. The lens caught me stepping out onto my porch, turning toward the Corbett house. Only I hadn't been home. I'd been 60 miles away, asleep in a motel. In the clip, the me on the porch raised a hand and waved once before the footage cut to static. I called the sheriff again. Deputy Weaver showed up, stone-faced as ever. He took the SD card, promised to look into it. A week passed. Then another. No word. When I finally drove down to the station, the clerk at the front desk looked confused. "Deputy Weaver," she said. "He's been out on leave. Broke his leg last month. Haven't had him on duty since." I just stared at her. "Who came to my house then?" I asked. She frowned. "Nobody should have. I sold the place the following spring. Took a loss, didn't care. When the new buyers asked about the neighbor's property, I told them the truth, that it was vacant, bank-owned, nothing to worry about. But sometimes I check the satellite images online. And every fall around November, there's always one shot, just one, where the Corbett house appears with the lights on. If you zoom in, you can see a figure in the upstairs window. Sometimes I swear it looks like me.